day 2. This is one of my favorite topics. This is when A does not equal 1. So the steps are going to be, we're going to factor out the GCF if necessary. Always, always, always do this step. This is the most important step right here, is to factor out the GCF. We're going to list factors of A, and we're going to list factors of C, of the A term and the C term. We're going to determine the signs, and we're going to guess and check. And that's what's always the fun. And we're going to always check our inners and our outers. This is what's going to determine whether you guessed right or wrong, the inners and the outers. All right, so for the first one, we're going to determine our signs. So this one tells us that both signs are the same. And because this is a positive, if it was a negative, this would tell me that they're going to be a positive and a negative. And this tells me that they're both going to be positive. Okay, so now my first term on my factoring is I'm looking for two numbers that I multiply together that will give me 2x squared. Well, I know that I have 2x and x. I like to have my biggest number over here. So 2x times x is going to give me 2x squared. So I'm looking for two factors that will, when I multiply together, that will give me 2x squared. So 2x times x will give me 2x squared. The second that I want to get is that I am going to go in and I have to determine where I'm going to place the 3 because I'm looking for the factors of 3. Now, I want to make sure that my inners and my outers are going to add up to 7. I know that I have a plus sign. So I have to determine, do I put the 3 and the 1 here, or do I put the 1 and the 3 here? So they have to, your inners and your outers have to add up to 7. So you're basically looking for 2 times 3, and then you want them to add up to 7. Okay, so I can either put the 3 and the 1 here, and my inners and my outers have to add up to 7. So if I do that, this is 3x, and this inner right here is going to be 2x. My outer is 2x, so 3x plus 2x is 5x. So did I choose the right place to put the 3 and the 1? No, I did not. So I have to go back in. This is 2x, and this is x. And then I have to put the 1 and the 3 here, and let me go check my inners and my outers. So I have a 1x, and 2x times 3 is going to give me 6x. Add those together. My inners and my outers are 7x. So these are my two factors, 2x plus 1 and x plus 3. All right, looking over here at letter B. All right, on letter B, first thing we check, we look to see, is there a greatest common factor between 5, 27, and 10? No, there is not, so there's nothing that I can take out. I'm going to determine my sign. This tells me that both my signs are going to be the same, and this tells me that they're both going to be positive. So I'm going to have two factors that look like this, a plus and a plus. Now I'm looking to see my first terms on each of my factors. I'm looking for two numbers that I multiply together that will give me 5n squared. Well, the factors of 5 are 1 and 5, and the factors of n squared are n and n. And so I can put a 5n and an n. I like to put the larger number over here on the left, and then I would put the n over on this side. That's how I always start it. So then I'm looking for two numbers that I multiply together that are going to give me 10. But then I want my inners and I need my outers to add up to 27n. So from here to here, they have to add up to 27. So this is where it becomes a guess and check, because factors of 10 are 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. So you can either place a 1 and a 10 here, or a 10 and a 1, or a 2 and a 5, or a 5 and a 2. But most important, when you get done, these inners and the outers have to add up to 27n. That's why we're checking it. So if I was to go put a 10 and a 1 here, I'm going to have 10n plus 5n, and that's not going to give me 27. So I can go ahead and move these around. I can go ahead and put a 5 here, and then if I have a 5, I can put a 2 here, and that's going to give me 5 plus 10, and that's still not going to give me the right numbers if I put a 2 and a 5, because this 2 times 5 has to equal this C right here. 2 times 5 is 10. That's where that number comes from. So 2n right here, my inners and my outers, that gives me 25n, which equals 27n, so I know I did it right. That's why we check our inners and our outers to make sure that we're factoring correctly. All right, looking at letter C, I check for greatest common factor between 3, -14, and 15. The greatest common factor is going to be 1, so I do not have to pull anything out. This 5 tells me that the signs are going to be the same, and they're both going to be a negative. Factors of 3 are going to be 3 and 1. So I'm going to have a 3x, and I will have an x. Let me go ahead. I'm sorry, that should be a negative and a negative. I'm looking for factors of 15. I'll have 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. Those are the factors that I can put in these last two positions. I need my inners and my outers to add up to a -14 when I get done. So you have to play with these numbers and figure out what's going to give me a -14. I have a 3 here. Well, obviously, if I put a 15 here, I'm starting with a 45. I'm not going to get to 15. So you have to have a little bit of number sense. If I put a 15 here, I'm already starting with 15. I'm not going to get a 14 because the numbers I'm going to be just adding because they're going to be a negative. So that's not going to work. If I put a 5 and I put a 3 here, my inners here is a -5x. My outers is a -9x. That gives me a -14x. And that means that I did this correctly. All right, looking at letter D, 7x squared minus 22x plus 3. Greatest common factor, is there anything to pull out? There is not, because the greatest common factor is 1. This positive tells me that the signs are the same. This tells me that they're both going to be a negative. So I have a negative and a negative. Factors of 7 are 7 times 1, and factors of 3 are 3 times 1. So I know I have a 7x here, and I can have a 1x. I need to figure out where do I put the 3 and the 1, because when I get done, I need my inners and my outers to add up to -22. So if I put a 3 and a 1 here, this is a -3x, and this is a -7x. That turns out to be -10x. So I did not do it right. And so that means that I'll put the -1 here and the -3 here. And this is a -1x, -21x, and that turns out to be a -22x. This is the correct form of my factoring. Right, looking at letter E, first thing I check for is to see if they have a greatest common factor. The greatest common factor between 2, 12, and 10 is going to be 2. So I'm going to pull out a 2. When I do that, I'm left with x squared plus 6x plus 5. Now I can factor this trinomial right here. This tells me the signs are going to be the same and they're both going to be positive. I'm looking for factors of x squared. That's going to be x and x. I'm looking for two numbers that I multiply together that will give me 5, that will add up to 6. And so factors of 5 are 1 times 5. And so I can either put a 5 and a 1 here, or a 1 and a 5. And so I'll try this combination, and this is 1x, and this is 5x, and that adds up to 6x. So you can either have 2 times x plus 5 times 1 x plus 1. They are equivalent. First step is always GCF, if they have it. So 3, 24, and 36, the GCF is 3. So I'm taking out a 3, and that leaves me x squared minus 8 plus 12. If you do not take out the GCF, you will get it wrong, because that is the very first step. This tells me that my signs are the same, and they're both going to be negative. Looking for two numbers I multiply together, that will give me x squared, so that's x and x. And then I'm looking for factors of 12 that will add up to a negative 8. And so I can have a negative 1, negative 12. When I add up to those, they're going to give me a negative 13. I can have a negative 2 times a negative 6, and that will add up to a negative 8. And so those are the two numbers that I'm looking for. Check my inners and my outers, and that gives me negative 8. I left my x up there, wrong, left that out, and that gives me a negative 8x. Letter G, greatest common factor between 3, 7, and 10 is going to be 1. And so we'll have 3x and x here. This negative tells me that the signs are going to be different, and so I'm going to have a positive and a negative. So I can't just go put those, because I have to wait and see. So I'm looking for two numbers that I multiply together that are going to be a negative 10. I need my inners and my outers to add up to a 7x. And so I have to start playing with my numbers, because this 3, I have to be careful where I put it. And so I can have a 1 and a 10, a negative 1 and a 10. I can have a 1 and a negative 10. I can use a 2 and a negative 5, and a negative 5 and a 2. That is my combination. And so see what you can come up with. But I have to take into account this 3 right here. And when I plug in those numbers, I want to have my inners and my outers add up to 7. And so if I put a 10 here, I will have to put a negative 1 here. And so this is going to be 10x minus 7x minus 3x, and that gives me 7x. Okay. Looking at letter H, this tells me the signs are going to be different. One's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. The greatest common factor between them is going to be 1. So those are the steps that you have to say to yourself. You walk yourself through that. The factors of 2x squared are going to be 2 times 1. And we just went over here the factors of negative 10. And so we have 2x and we have x. And then I'll look to see, which one of these do I use? Because I have to have my inners and outers to be a positive 1. And so do I want to put the 10 here? Do I want to put a 1 here? Or what do I like to do? And this is going to be a positive 5 minus 2. Because this is 5x and this is minus 4x. And that is equal to a 1x. And I can tell that these are not the difference of two squares, because the difference of two squares only is a binomial, which has 2, and this is a trinomial, which has 3 terms. All right, factoring trinomials with more than one variable is going to be the same. The only thing is that you're just going to make sure that you include the variables. So x squared plus 9x plus 14y squared. And so greatest common factor between those is going to be just 1. And so two numbers you multiply together, that will give you x squared. And then you're looking to see the signs. This tells you the signs are going to be the same and they're both going to be positive. Now I'm looking for two numbers that I multiply together that will give me 14y squared, and that will add up to 9xy. So first of all, you're looking for this last term. And so you're looking to see what times what will give you y squared. Well, you're going to have a y and a y, because you have to have, for each one of your products, you have to have one of the variables. And then you're looking to see what can I multiply to get 14, 1 times 14 and 2 times 7. And then you want that inner and the outer to add up to 9. Well, 1 and 14 is 15, and then 2 times 7. So you'll have 2y and 7, and you'll check that. This is an x, so you have 2xy, and then 7xy, and that is 9xy. Letter B. This tells you that your signs are going to be different, and this just tells you that basically you have to be careful and check your signs. So two numbers you multiply together, that will give you 2a squared, so you know one's going to be 2a and the other is going to be a. And then we want to go ahead and we're looking for factors of 15 that will add up to -7 when we find our inners and our outers. So you can be looking at factors of 15. We know we're going to have a B and a B here. And so you can just go ahead and play with those numbers and see which ones will work. You know, if I put 15 here, I'm already at a 30, so I know that's not going to work. If I put a 15 here, I know I'm going to be at 13, so it's going to be the combination of 3 and 5. And if I put a 3 here, so this is going to give me 10 and 3, and so if I need a negative, I have to have the negative over here. Alrighty, so the last part of this is factoring can be used to answer questions where division is necessary. So the area of a rectangle is x squared minus 6x plus 8. The length is x minus 4 times width. So our formula is area is equal to length times width. So we know that the area over here is x squared minus 6x plus 8. We also know that the length is x minus 4. So we're looking for two products. So you have to ask yourself, this plus tells me that both the signs are going to be the same, and this tells me over here that this sign is going to be the negative. So if I look over here, and what I just said is that both these signs are going to be a negative. So if I know that I have two products, because this is a trinomial, and when I factor, I'm going to break it down into two products, then I know that over this has to be a negative. So this tells me, so both signs are the same. And this is going to be both negative. So that's how I know that this sign over here is a negative. I also know that the first term on each one is going to be x times x. Well, if this is x, this is an x. I also asked myself, if this is a -4 times what is going to give me a +8? Well, this is a -2. So those are the questions that you have to ask yourself. So my width is x minus 2 units. Another way they could ask you is find the quotient when x squared minus 3x minus 4 is divided by x plus 4. So if your area is x squared, or your end product is x squared minus 3x minus 4, so that means you have two numbers that are multiplied by together, x plus 1, and you want to find that other product. This tells me that this both signs, one is going to be a negative and the other is going to be a positive. So if this is a positive, this has to be a negative. So I'm using what I know about factoring. I know the first one is x squared, so x times x is going to give me x squared. I'm looking at my c value, and I know 1 times something has to give me a negative 4. This is a positive 1, so this has to be 4. So that is how I figured that out. All right, so first thing you want to make sure of is that you're checking to see if it's a trinomial. If it's a trinomial, then you can factor it with 2 products. If it is a binomial, then you want to check for the difference of 2 squares. You always check to see if it has the greatest common factor. So on your homework, you have 3x squared plus 2x minus 5. This is a trinomial, so we're going to see if we can break it down into 2 products. You're looking to see greatest common factor between 3, 2, and negative 5 is 1. This tells me the signs are going to be different, a negative and a positive, so you can have a positive and a negative. And I'm looking for 2 signs that are going to be positive, that add up to a 3x squared, so this can be 3x, and this is x. Okay. I'm also want to check that my c is negative 5, so I'm checking my inners and my outers to make sure that my inners and my outers add up to positive 2. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5, so I can put the 5 over here, or I can put the 5 over here. And so my inners and my outers have to be 2x. So if I put my 5 here and my 2 here, this is 5x. Oops, I'm sorry, this should be a 1. And this is a 5x, and this is a 3, and so this is 2x. So your factors are 3x plus 5 and x minus 1. I'll rewrite that. Those are your factors. Looking at 16x squared plus 8x plus 1. You can have factors of 1 times 16 and 4 and 4, or you can have 2 and 8. So you have lots of different combinations to go and try. And your last factor is 1 and 1. Your signs are going to be the same. They're a positive 1 and a positive 1. And so you can look to see this. You know this has to be 1 and 1. You want your inners and your outers to add up to 8x. And so if I put a 16 here, there's no way I'm going to get an 8 in here to add up to inners and the outers. And if I put an 8 and a 2, there's no way, because this will be 8, 8, and a 2. There's no way I'm going to get an 8x. So just by common sense, I know that this has to be 4x. So 4x and 4x is going to give me 8x. Looking at number 9, you should see that there are only two terms, which is a binomial. So in your mind, you should be thinking, binomial, do I have a difference of 2 squares? 81 is a perfect square, y squared is a perfect square, and 144 is a perfect square. I'm also thinking, greatest common factor. Is there a greatest common factor? Yes, there is. So what can I take out? I can take out a 9. So now I have 9, and I'm left with 9y squared minus 16, because we always take out the greatest common factor. And this now becomes 9, and then I have 3y squared minus 4 and 3y squared, 3y plus 4. So now you have 9, parentheses 3y minus 4, and 3y plus 4. All right, see you later.